So how long have you been like this?
Since 1918. That's when Carlisle found me, dying of Spanish influenza.
What was it like?
The venom was excruciating, but what Carlisle did was much harder.
Oh, Edward.
Throughout history, viruses have mutated and caused multiple pandemics, one of the most famous being the pandemic of 1918. It went by many other names, one of the most common being the Spanish flu, as Edward previously mentioned. In order to understand how an outbreak as severe as this works, we must first understand viruses. The strain of virus that caused the 1918 flu pandemic was H1N1. It recently had a resurgence, and most of us know it as the swine flu. It was all in the same, and lucky for us, we had vaccines. H1N1 is a specific strain of influenza virus, which is a single-stranded, negative-sense, segmented RNA. These viruses survive and function by using the host cells against themselves. They insert their own genetic code into the host cell's inner workings and use the host cell to create more virus. As there's more and more virus being created, the cell will slowly enlarge and eventually expand to a point where it must burst. Upon the bursting of the cell, these viruses are released throughout the body, and this is how they spread throughout, and the same cycle is repeated multiple times, as demonstrated in this video.
Killing an estimated 50 to 100 million people, infecting a fifth of the world and a fourth of the U.S. population, the influenza outbreak of 1918 caused worldwide panic. The influenza pandemic was also known as the Spanish flu. This was because it was occurring during World War I, and all the countries involved in the war had strict censorship. During this time, the countries would not allow their press to report on the outbreak. This was to prevent demoralization of the citizens. Spain was not involved in the war, and news of their outbreak was well covered, and this is how the world learned of the influenza virus, leading the world to believe that this is where the virus originated. Although there is still speculation of its actual origin, within months this pandemic spread around the world and killed more than any other disease in history. The pandemic itself lasted from June 1918 to December of 1920.
Before this time, it actually showed itself in two phases in the U.S. The first in the spring of 1918 in Kansas. Although this strain of the virus was not as serious as the strain that was to come, it still raised some concerns. In this first phase, the people it would infect would recover from its cold-like symptoms in an average of 3 days. Then upon its resurfacing later that year, after a mutation within the strain, the virus began dropping people where they stood.
The most remarkable symptoms, other than those consistent with the flu, would be bleeding from the mucous membranes. This involved blood loss from the nose and gastrointestinal tract. The majority of deaths would come from the pneumonia associated with the influenza virus at the time. From the virus itself, the most common cause of death would be hemorrhaging or edema in the lungs. Ironically, the most susceptible to the deadliest symptoms of the disease were the middle-aged demographic from 20 to 40 years of age. Because the immune system is so well developed during this age, when it becomes attacked by such a severe virus, the immune system overreacts to fight the virus off.
World War I played a major role in the devastation the virus caused. With so many troops interacting internationally, it made it easy for the virus to reach all corners of the world. The pandemic was short-lived due to the fact that viruses are forever evolving. Science believes that for organisms that live off their host, they will adapt to be less lethal so they can live longer. Until the 1990s, the true identity of the virus was unknown, at which time scientists collected tissue samples of the infected deceased from the time of the pandemic. The study would prove that the virus had ultimately transitioned to humans after having evolved within the pig for several decades. Modern technology allowed us to further study the virus and develop vaccinations that would be effective in fighting the H1N1 strain. Through these vaccines, we were able to contain the resurgence of the strain in 2009.
What do you think is better, all in the one cheek or spreading them out? Okay.
Let's go, Anthony.
You right, buddy? Sweetie, do you really have to do this? I'm not gonna get yellow fever in my barracks.
No, if you'd rather, she can do it.
Whoa, just give me a minute.
Honey, the government's a stick 'em. We stick 'em.
In short, the influenza pandemic of 1918 had a long-lasting effect throughout the entire world. Throughout history, there have been many events that have shaped the world as we know it today. This pandemic may have been one of the most catastrophic. Because of this, it forced different parts of the world to overcome their differences to ensure such an event would not repeat itself.